Some people say loneliness is a quiet room. For me, loneliness was a room filled with plants, and still feeling like the only living thing in it. My name is Stefan. I'm 25, hardworking, disciplined, the kind of guy who built his entire life around routines because routines don't disappoint you. I worked online, editing videos, managing clients, designing thumbnails, whatever paid the bills. My days were full, my schedule tight, and my apartment always smelled like soil and eucalyptus from the plants I spent half my time tending. People used to tell me my place felt peaceful. But peace is not the same as being fulfilled. I guess that's why I always ended up camping alone. Whenever the world felt too heavy, or my chest felt tight for reasons I couldn't explain, I'd pack a small bag, grab my tent, and drive into the forests where no notifications could follow me. Out there, surrounded by tall pines, cool air, and silence so deep it felt like a blanket, I could breathe again. Nature never asked me why I didn't have a partner yet. It never judged me for being single at 25. It never made me feel like I wasn't enough. But even in the quiet, especially in the quiet, I felt the truth pressing against my ribs. I wanted someone, not just anyone. Someone who made me feel safe. Someone who looked at me like I wasn't just a background character in their life. Someone whose presence didn't drain me, but filled all the places inside me I couldn't reach on my own. Still, wanting something is different from finding it. My last relationship ended before it really began. He said I was too gentle, like softness was a flaw. I told myself I didn't need love, that my plants, my work, my long walks through nature were enough. But every time I zipped my backpack and set out for the woods, I knew I was lying to myself. I wasn't chasing adventure. I wasn't searching for peace. I was running from a feeling I didn't know how to fix. Or maybe I was hoping that somewhere out there, in the quiet, the universe would place someone in my path. Someone who wouldn't be scared of my softness. Someone strong enough to meet me halfway. Someone who felt just as alone as I did. That weekend, when I left my apartment, locked the door behind me, and told my plants I'd be back in 2 days, I didn't know my life was about to change. I didn't know a storm was coming. I didn't know my tent would never survive it. And I definitely didn't know a man would find me first. A man whose name, whose hands, whose smile, I would never forget for the rest of my life. But all of that came later. At that moment, I just wanted the quiet. I had no idea the quiet was about to bring someone who would change everything. The drive to the forest was supposed to calm me. It usually did, the long stretch of highway, the light tapping of my fingers on the steering wheel, the playlist I'd made specifically for moments when I needed to disappear from the world for a while. But that day felt different. The air was unusually still, the sky too pale, like it hadn't decided whether it wanted to be blue or gray. Even the trees lining the road leaned slightly inward, as if whispering something to each other. Something I wasn't meant to hear. Still, I kept driving. I always did. The forest came into view after an hour or so. Tall pines, thick clusters of ferns, wet soil from the previous night's drizzle. This place had been my escape for years. My secret refuge where no one expected anything from me. But as soon as I stepped out of the car and inhaled the air, something in me tightened. It wasn't fear. It wasn't excitement. It was something in between, as if the forest was holding its breath, waiting. I brushed the feeling away. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe the week had worn me down more than I thought. I grabbed my backpack, my tent, and started walking deeper into the woods. My boots pressed into damp earth, each step sinking slightly, grounding me in the silence I had come here for. But the silence wasn't right either. Usually it was calming, soft, steady, familiar. Today it felt like a pause before a violin string snaps. As I reached the clearing where I always set up my tent, a sudden gust of wind hit my back, strong enough to make me stagger forward. I frowned and looked up. The clouds had thickened. The tops of the trees were swaying harder now. "Great," I muttered. "Just my luck." The weather app had said light wind, nothing more, and I'd depended on that forecast like an idiot. But I wasn't about to let a little breeze ruin my weekend. I told myself it would settle. It always settled. While I unpacked the tent poles, something bright moved through the trees. A flash of white. metallic glint, engine humming softly, a Ranger truck. It rolled slowly along the dirt path at the edge of the clearing, the vehicle's headlights briefly cutting through the early evening haze. Its windows were tinted. The driver's face was nothing more than a shadow behind glass. Still, something about the shape, the posture, the quiet authority of the silhouette made my breath catch for a second. The truck paused, just for a moment, as if the driver was looking directly at me. Then it moved on. I watched it disappear between the trees, listening to the fading growl of the engine. I told myself it was nothing. Rangers patrolled these woods all the time. Still, a strange heaviness lingered in my chest. As I went back to setting up my tent, the wind picked up again, stronger than before. Something was coming, something big, but I ignored it. I had come here for peace, and I refused to believe anything could take that away. I didn't know then that the forest wasn't warning me. It was preparing me for the moment when a storm would tear my world apart, and a stranger would step into it. A stranger who wouldn't stay a stranger for long. By the time the sun dipped behind the treetops, the wind had become a living thing. It growled, pushed. It circled the clearing like it was searching for something to destroy. I sat inside my tent, knees pulled to my chest, trying to convince myself that this wasn't as bad as it sounded. I'd camped through storms before. Light ones, loud ones, even one where a branch fell so close it tore a line into the soil beside me. But this was different. The first strike of thunder cracked across the sky so sharp it felt like the air split in two. My heart jumped into my throat. The walls of my tent trembled, shaking like thin lungs trying desperately to breathe. "Calm down," I whispered to myself. "It's just wind." Except it wasn't just wind. The ground beneath me vibrated. The trees groaned. Something heavy crashed somewhere behind the clearing, followed by the frantic rustle of leaves whipping in every direction. I crawled closer to the front of the tent, gripping the poles as the fabric swelled outward like a balloon ready to burst. Rain hammered the roof so violently it sounded like handfuls of gravel being thrown down on me. Then the zipper flap snapped open from the pressure. Just a few inches, but enough to let a slice of freezing air cut across my face. "No, no, no," I scrambled, pulling it shut, but another gust slammed into the tent and sent the poles bending sideways. My shelter wasn't going to make it. I could feel it. The storm wanted it gone. The next gust hit so hard the entire tent lifted an inch off the ground. I wrapped my arms around the nearest pole, pressing my weight into the floor, trying to hold everything together. But the storm didn't care how hard I fought. With a roar, the wind ripped the stakes clean out of the soil. The entire structure twisted like wet paper. I felt the fabric tear behind me. A long, horrible sound, and cold rain burst inside, drenching my clothes, my hair, my skin. My only shelter was collapsing on top of me. Fear surged through my body so fast it felt electric. I pushed my way out of the tangled mess, stumbling into the open clearing. Rain blinded me instantly. Wind shoved me left, then right. I could barely stay on my feet. "Help!" My voice disappeared into the storm. The sky flashed white, lightning tearing across the clouds. For a split second, the entire forest lit up like daylight. And that was when I saw him, a figure in the distance, tall, broad-shouldered, moving toward me with steady, purposeful steps, cutting through the storm like it wasn't even touching him. A man. His silhouette was framed in the white glow, powerful, unmistakable. And even though I couldn't see his face, something inside me reacted instantly. Not fear, not relief. Something deeper, like recognition without understanding. The thunder rolled again, louder this time. Rain pounded my skin. My ruined tent lay flattened behind me, and the stranger kept coming. One step, then another, closer, stronger, unshaken by the storm that had torn my world apart. In that moment, soaked, shaking, breathless, I didn't know who he was, but I felt, somewhere deep inside, that he wasn't just coming toward me. He was coming for me. The storm swallowed everything, sound, breath, even thought. But the man moving toward me, he seemed untouched by it. I could barely stand as the wind shoved against my back. Rain stung my skin like needles. My tent was a ruined heap behind me. My heartbeat was loud enough to drown out the thunder. And still, he walked toward me. When he finally stepped close enough for me to see him clearly, the storm flickered around us like it had paused just long enough to let me take him in. A ranger's jacket. Chest broad enough to block half the wind. Shoulders built like he'd spent years lifting fallen logs instead of weights. A jawline shadowed with stubble. And eyes warm, steady, impossibly calm, focused entirely on me. "Are you okay?" he shouted over the storm, voice deep but gentle. I opened my mouth, but the wind punched the words out before they formed. I only managed a broken shake of my head. He stepped closer, his presence instantly shielding me from the worst of the rain. "I'm John," he said, leaning down slightly so I could hear him. "I'm a ranger. You're not safe out here." Another harsh gust hit us, and without hesitation, he placed one steady hand on my back, guiding me toward him. His touch was firm, warm, even through the layers of soaked fabric. My breath caught, not because of the storm, because for the first time all night, I felt anchored. "Your tent's gone," he said, glancing at the shredded mess behind me. "We need to get you out of this." I nodded again, water sliding down my face, hair plastered to my forehead. He took my arm, not roughly, not urgently, but with the kind of care you give someone who might fall apart if you squeeze too hard. "Stay close," he said. Close wasn't a choice. The wind nearly knocked me off my feet the moment he moved. He wrapped his arm fully around me, pulling me against his side, shielding me with his body as he pushed us forward through the storm. I could feel the strength in him, the steadiness, the quiet confidence that nothing, not even this raging sky, could move him unless he allowed it. Every step forward felt like a step out of the chaos and into something I didn't understand yet. Lightning cracked again, bright, sharp. For a moment the world lit up around us, and our eyes met. His gaze was intense, searching, full of something I didn't expect. Concern. Deep, genuine concern for a man he hadn't even known 5 minutes ago. And something else. Something that made my stomach flip in a way no storm ever could. "Almost there," he murmured. His voice was close to my ear now, warmer than the wind, steadier than the ground beneath us. I let myself lean into him, not because I had no choice, but because some part of me trusted him instantly, completely irrationally. And as he led me toward safety, one thought began to form in the back of my mind. Maybe the storm didn't take something from me. Maybe it was leading me to something I didn't know I needed, to someone I had never imagined finding, to John. By the time we reached the ranger station cabin, my entire body was shaking. Not from cold alone, but from the overwhelming rush of everything that had just happened. John pushed the door open with his shoulder, guiding me inside before the wind could drag me back out again. The moment the door slammed shut, the world went quiet. The storm was still raging, but now it was outside, muffled, distant, like someone had lowered the volume on a nightmare. The cabin was small but warm. A stone fireplace glowed in the corner, flames dancing lazily, throwing soft light across wooden walls. The air smelled faintly of pine, leather, and something comforting I couldn't name. I stood near the entrance, dripping water onto the floor, suddenly very aware of how pathetic I must have looked. Hair plastered to my face, clothes clinging to my skin, breath shaky and uneven. John noticed immediately. "Sit," he said gently, pointing toward a cushioned bench near the fire. "You're freezing." I moved toward it, legs unsteady. When I sat down, the heat from the fire hit me all at once, almost painfully warm. My fingers tingled as they thawed. John hung his jacket on a hook, then rummaged through a wooden chest. He pulled out a folded stack of clothes, soft-looking gray sweats and a dark green long-sleeve shirt. "Here," he said, stepping closer. "They should fit well enough." I hesitated, staring at the clothes in his hands. He'd saved me, sheltered me, and now he was offering me warmth. The kindness felt strangely intimate. His expression softened as he noticed my hesitation. Don't worry, he said in a lower, calmer tone. It's just to get you dry. You can change in the bathroom. Third door on the left. I reached out to take the clothes, and when our hands touched, just the tips of our fingers grazing, something jolted through me. Not electricity, not fear. Something warm, quiet, curious. His eyes lifted to mine at the exact same moment. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The storm cracked outside, snapping the moment in half. I pulled my hand back instinctively, clutching the clothes to my chest. Thank you, I managed. He gave a small nod, but there was something in his eyes, something softer than before. Something that made my cheeks warm despite the cold water still dripping from my hair. I went into the bathroom and closed the door. My reflection in the mirror looked like a man who had lived through 5 years in one night. I changed quickly, letting the dry fabric swallow the trembling in my body. When I stepped back into the cabin, John had placed a mug of something warm on the small table near the fire. Tea, he said without turning around. It helps. I took a sip. It was perfect, sweet, earthy, calming. He finally faced me, eyes moving from my face down to the clothes that were slightly loose on me. Something flickered in his expression. Approval, relief, maybe even something deeper. You look better, he said. My heart thudded once, heavy and unexpected. The fire crackled. Rain hammered the roof. And inside that small cabin, I felt something shift. Subtle, invisible, but undeniable. I had come here running from loneliness, but sitting near that fire, wrapped in John's clothes, watching him watch me, for the first time in a long time I didn't feel alone. The storm refused to settle. Hours passed, and the wind still howled against the cabin walls like something alive. Rain slapped the windows in sharp bursts, thunder rolling so deeply it rattled the floor beneath us. Even the fire flickered nervously, shadows trembling across the room. John kept glancing toward the window, jaw tight, posture alert, like a man who'd seen too many storms to trust even a moment of calm. You should try to get some sleep, he finally said, turning toward me. I looked at the 2 beds on opposite sides of the room, simple wooden frames with wool blankets neatly folded at the edges. The distance between them felt like a whole world. I will, I murmured, though the truth was I doubted I'd sleep at all. Not with my adrenaline still crashing through my system. Not with the storm still roaring outside. Not with him in the same room. John grabbed an extra blanket from a shelf and placed it on the bed closer to the window. You can take mine, he said without hesitation. It's warmer. I blinked. But that's your bed. He shrugged, like the decision was obvious. You're the one who was out in that mess. Your body needs the heat. Before I could argue, a violent gust slammed against the cabin, making the wooden beams creak. I flinched. John noticed instantly. He stepped closer, calm, steady, grounding. Stefan, he said softly, you'll sleep in my bed. That's not a request. The firmness in his voice didn't scare me. It soothed me, like someone taking responsibility when I didn't have the strength to. So I nodded. He gestured to his bed, and I slipped beneath the heavy wool blanket. The warmth was immediate, almost overwhelming after the cold I'd endured. The fabric smelled faintly of cedar and soap, clean, comforting, like him. John turned off the lantern, leaving only the faint glow of the dying fire. At first, he lay down in the second bed. I could hear the rustle of the sheets, his quiet exhale. I closed my eyes, trying to slow my breathing. Another crack of thunder exploded above us. I flinched again. A moment passed. Then another. Stefan. John's voice cut through the darkness. Yeah. You're not sleeping. No. I whispered. His bed creaked. I heard his slow footsteps cross the room. My heart thumped harder with each one. He sat at the edge of his bed, my bed now, his silhouette outlined faintly by the firelight. You're freezing again, he murmured, placing a hand gently on my shoulder. I wasn't. Not anymore. But the warmth of his touch made my breath catch. I can stay here, he said hesitantly, just until you fall asleep. My pulse hammered in my ears. Okay. He slid under the blanket beside me, careful, slow, making sure I was comfortable. The mattress dipped under his weight, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then the storm screamed again, rattling the window. Instinctively, we shifted closer. His shoulder brushed mine, just a small touch, but it felt like a spark lighting a fuse deep inside me. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. In the quiet between thunder, I could hear his heartbeat. Steady, warm, patient. Completely opposite of the chaos outside. Better? He whispered. I nodded, though I wasn't sure he could see it in the dark. Our bodies weren't tangled, not even fully touching, but the closeness was enough to send tension humming through the air. A slow burn, a quiet pull, a feeling that no storm could drown out. For the first time that night, my eyes grew heavy. Not from exhaustion, but from the strange safety of being next to him. We didn't sleep easily. We didn't sleep far apart. We slept, suspended in something new, something neither of us named yet. But that night, the night we tried to sleep, was the night everything shifted. Somewhere between the thunder fading and the fire settling into soft embers, I drifted into a light, uneasy sleep. Not deep enough to forget the storm. Not deep enough to forget the man beside me. Just enough to float in the space between awareness and dreams. But then a cold shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't the storm this time. It was me. My body remembering the hours I'd spent soaking in freezing rain, the shock settling deep in my bones. I tried to pull the blanket closer around my shoulders, but my fingers felt clumsy and numb. Before I could adjust again, I felt movement beside me. John stirred, a quiet shift of weight, the warm brush of the blanket being pulled upward, and then his arm slid around me, slow, instinctive, without hesitation. He pulled me gently toward him until my back rested against his chest. His body a wall of steady heat. His breath touched the back of my neck, warm, slow, unhurried. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe entirely. Cold again, he murmured, voice rough with sleep. I didn't answer, couldn't. My throat tightened, and my heart felt too large for my ribs. His grip tightened, not possessively, not anxiously, but protectively. The way someone holds something precious without realizing they're holding it so carefully. And God, I hadn't felt that in years. Not since before heartbreak taught me to keep distance. Not since I convinced myself I didn't need anyone. Not since I stopped believing someone could look at me and want to stay close. But here he was, a stranger who wasn't a stranger anymore. A man who didn't even know my whole story, yet held me like he understood every piece I'd ever lost. My breathing hitched, and I felt him notice it immediately. His thumb brushed my arm in a slow, reassuring line. Just relax, he whispered. His chest rose and fell behind me, each breath steady, grounding. Without meaning to, without trying at all, my breath began syncing with his. The rhythm came naturally, like my body was learning a new language and discovering it already knew the words. Inhale, exhale. His warmth pressed into my spine, melting the shiver inside me. I could hear his heartbeat now, deep, calm. A sound I didn't know I needed until this exact moment. My eyes stung, not with sadness, but with a kind of relief I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Protection, comfort, a touch that didn't demand anything, didn't ask for anything, didn't take anything. A touch that simply was. And even though the storm still echoed outside, even though we were technically strangers, even though this moment shouldn't have meant as much as it did, my chest tightened with something undeniable. I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't misreading it. This wasn't accidental. John's face pressed lightly against the back of my head, his breath warming my hair. His hand stayed firm around my waist, thumb drawing small, absent circles against my side. Circles no one draws by mistake. The electricity wasn't from the storm this time. It was between us. Alive, quiet, undeniable. And as my eyes finally closed again, sinking into the warmth of him, one truth settled deep in my chest. For the first time in a very long time, I felt protected. And it was because of him. Morning came gently, so gently that for a moment, I didn't know where I was. The storm had quieted some time before dawn. The thunder was gone. The wind had settled. And in its place came a soft, golden light slipping through the cabin window. But the very first thing I became aware of was warmth. Not the fire. Not the blankets. John. His arm was still loosely around my waist. His breath steady against my shoulder. Our bodies naturally aligned like we had been sleeping this way for years instead of hours. I didn't move. I didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. Felt too good. Too rare. Too much like something I'd only ever imagined but never expected to feel. Eventually, though, John stirred behind me. His arm slipped away slowly, carefully. As if he didn't want to wake me but somehow already knew I was awake. "Morning," he murmured, voice low and husky from sleep. I turned slightly, meeting his eyes. He looked different in the morning light. Softer, younger somehow, but still carrying that grounded strength that had pulled me through the storm. "Morning," I whispered back. He sat up, stretching his arms above his head, the fabric of his shirt tightening across his shoulders. Then he stood and walked toward the small kitchenette area near the back of the cabin. "I'll make us something to eat," he said. "You've had a night." I watched him quietly as he moved. Strong hands setting a pan on the stove, lighting the burner, reaching into cabinets. There was nothing rushed about him, nothing showy. He moved with a confidence that came from someone who knew how to take care of things. And people. It was strangely beautiful. The smell of coffee soon filled the room. A warm, earthy scent that settled deep in my chest. "You don't have to cook for me," I said, finally sitting up. He glanced over his shoulder, one eyebrow raised slightly. "I know." And then, after a heartbeat, "I want to." That simple honesty hit me harder than I expected. When he handed me a mug, our fingers brushed again, just like the night before. But this time, neither of us pulled away quickly. The touch lingered, warm and quiet. I inhaled through the steam of the coffee. "This is really good." "Old Ranger trick," he said with a small smile. "We survive on strong coffee more than training." His smile was different now, less guarded, more real. We sat at the small wooden table, plates of eggs and toast between us. The storm's destruction felt far away here in the warm morning glow. After a moment, John's expression shifted, thoughtful. "You're not the only one who comes out here to get away," he said. I looked up. "No," he shook his head. "Being a ranger means spending a lot of time alone. People think we enjoy isolation. But sometimes it's just easier than trying to find someone who understands the lifestyle." His tone was quiet, almost vulnerable. I swallowed softly. "I get that. I've been alone for a long time too. Work, routine, plants." I laughed lightly at myself. "It's peaceful, but not fulfilling." He nodded, eyes locked onto mine with a kind of recognition I hadn't expected. "It gets lonely," he said simply. "More than I like to admit." Something warm tightened in my chest. Trust. That was what this was. Two people, both used to carrying their solitude silently, finally setting it down where someone else could see it. He leaned back slightly in his chair, studying me. Not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but in a way that made me feel seen. "I'm glad I found you last night," he said. My pulse stumbled. "Me too," I whispered. And in that quiet morning light, coffee between us, stories shared, smiles exchanged, something in the air shifted. Not dramatic, not explosive, just gently certain. The beginning of something neither of us could deny anymore. By late morning, the storm had fully passed. The sky was washed clean. The air smelled like wet pine and new beginnings, and sunlight filtered through the trees in thin, golden beams. John stepped outside the cabin first, hands on his hips, eyes scanning the forest like he belonged to it, and maybe he did. When he turned to me, his expression softened. "Come on," he said. "I want to show you something." I followed him along a narrow path behind the ranger station. At first it looked like any other trail, damp soil, thick ferns, pine needles cushioning each step. But there was something different about it. Something untouched. "It's not on the official maps," John explained. Hardly anyone knows it's here. Why show it to me? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. He just smiled. A small, vulnerable smile that made my heart stumble a little. You'll see. We walked in comfortable silence for a while. The forest glistened from last night's rain. Little droplets clung to leaves and sparkled when the light hit them. The air felt crisp, cool, like the storm had blown away everything old, leaving only something fresh behind. John moved confidently, every step sure. I watched the way branches brushed against his shoulders, the way he gently guided them aside so they wouldn't snap back at me. It was such a small gesture, but it meant more than I expected. Eventually, the hidden trail opened into a clearing, small, round, and breathtaking. A single fallen log rested beside a stream, the water gliding over rocks with a soft, soothing rhythm. "This is my spot," John said quietly. "I come here when things get too loud." I lowered myself onto the log, listening to the water. "It's beautiful." He sat beside me, close enough that our knees brushed. Not intentional, or maybe it was. The touch lingered, like neither of us wanted to move first. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I exhaled. "John, can I tell you something?" He turned slightly, giving me his attention like he had all the time in the world. "I'm tired," I said softly. "Not physically, just tired of being alone. Tired of pretending I'm fine with it. I go camping to escape, but the truth is, I think I'm running from an emptiness I don't know how to fill." The confession surprised even me. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the softness in his eyes. But once the words started, they just kept coming. "I've been on my own for so long that I almost convinced myself I didn't need anyone. But last night, when you held me," I paused, heat rising to my cheeks. "I realized how much I've been missing something I've never really had." John didn't interrupt. He didn't look away. He didn't judge. He just listened. When I finally fell silent, he inhaled slowly, as if he'd been waiting for the right moment to speak. "I know that feeling," he said, his voice low, honest. "Everyone thinks I like being out here alone. But the truth is, sometimes the silence gets heavy. I go home to an empty cabin every night. No one waiting. No one to talk to. No one to ask how my day was." He swallowed, his jaw tightening just slightly. "And when I found you last night, cold, scared, trying to hold everything together by yourself, I saw myself. Or maybe I saw what I've been missing." My chest tightened. Not from sadness, from recognition. He continued, his voice softer now. "I felt something missing for a long time, Stefan. And I didn't know what it was until you looked at me in that storm." The stream murmured between us. The sunlight warmed our shoulders. The world seemed to hold its breath. Our hands rested near each other on the log. Close, too close. John looked down at them, then back up into my eyes. And in that moment, quiet, raw, unguarded, something shifted between us again. Not a spark, not a storm, something deeper. A beginning neither of us could deny anymore. The hidden clearing was so peaceful that it felt unreal, like nature itself was trying to make up for the terror of the night before. But peace can be distracting. Peace makes you forget the ground is still wet from the storm. John stood and walked toward a smooth cluster of stones near the stream, pointing out how the water carved patterns in them. I followed him, stepping carefully, but the moss was slick, a thin layer of green glass beneath my boots. "I wouldn't stand there," he began. Too late. My foot slid out from under me. A sharp gasp tore from my throat. The world tilted. Cold air rushed past my face. And then, strong arms caught me mid-fall. The impact never came. Instead, my body collided with John's chest, solid, warm, steady enough to pull the whole world back into place. My breath left me in a single, trembling rush. He held me tightly, one arm wrapped firmly around my waist, the other braced against my back, keeping me upright. Our faces were close. So close I could see the flecks of gold in his eyes, the faint raindrops still clinging to the edge of his lashes. "Stefan," he whispered, his voice a mix of fear and relief. "You scared me." I swallowed hard, my hands instinctively gripping his shoulders. I'm okay. But I didn't move, and neither did he. The forest went silent around us. The stream's soft bubbling faded into a gentle hum. Even the birds stopped their chatter, as if watching the moment unfold. John's breath brushed my cheek, warm and unsteady. His grip around my waist didn't loosen. If anything, he held me closer. "I've got you," he murmured. Something fluttered violently in my chest. Not fear, not adrenaline, but something far more dangerous. Something that felt like truth trying to break free. "John," I breathed. At the sound of his name, he lowered his forehead toward mine, close enough that the warmth of him soaked into my skin. Our breaths mingled, his slow and shaky, mine rapid and uneven. There was a softness in his eyes I hadn't seen before, something unguarded, something intensely real. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. I nodded, unable to look away. "When I saw you last night, before I even reached you, I felt something." His voice trembled, just barely. Something that scared me because it made no sense. "But when you turned toward me," he paused, exhaling shakily. "I was drawn to you. I didn't know why. I still don't fully know why. I just felt it. Immediately." My fingers tightened slightly on his shoulders. "John." He swallowed, eyes flicking briefly to my lips before returning to my eyes. "And now," he whispered, "standing here, holding you like this, I know exactly what that feeling was." The world narrowed. Just him. Just me. Just this impossible moment. I didn't ask what he meant. I understood. Nature shifted around us. A gentle breeze rustling the leaves, sunlight breaking through the canopy to cast golden water over the stones, over us. Felt like the entire forest was leaning forward, waiting. John's hand slid slowly from my back to my jaw, fingers brushing my cheek with a tenderness that made my breath hitch. "Stefan," he said, softer than the stream, warmer than the sunlight. I leaned into his touch before I realized I was doing it. Everything inside me answered him. He didn't rush. He didn't pull me in sharply or with certainty. He moved slowly, giving me time to pull away, giving me the choice. I didn't pull away. Our noses brushed first, barely. His breath trembled against my lips. And then, he kissed me. Soft, warm, tentative at first, like he was afraid I might break. Then deeper, steadier, as if every piece of him had been waiting for this without knowing it. My hands slid from his shoulders to his chest, feeling the rise and fall of his breath, the thrum of his heartbeat beneath my palms. The world blurred. Water, trees, sunlight, all melting away until only the feeling of him remained. The kiss wasn't explosive. It wasn't desperate. It was inevitable, a truth spoken in silence. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads stayed pressed together. John's eyes were bright, not with lust, not with adrenaline, but with something gentler, something unmistakable. "I think," he murmured, voice barely above a breath, "fate sent you to me last night." My chest tightened in a way that almost hurt. "Maybe it sent us to each other," I whispered back. The forest exhaled, and so did we. We walked back to the cabin in a quiet neither of us wanted to break. Not because we were unsure of what had happened, but because the silence felt full now, warm, charged with meaning. John kept close beside me, not touching constantly, just near enough that our hands brushed every few steps, near enough that each accidental touch felt less accidental. By the time we reached the cabin door, the sun was sinking behind the trees, turning the sky a soft amber. The storm had washed the world clean, and now everything smelled new. Soil, pine, fresh air, and something else hanging between us. Something unspoken but undeniable. Inside, the cabin felt smaller than before. Or maybe we had just gotten closer. John lit a lantern, its warm glow pooling across the wooden floor. I sat on the same bench near the fire where I'd first thawed out the night before. But tonight, the chill wasn't in my bones. Tonight, my heartbeat was the thing that needed calming. He joined me a moment later, sitting so close that our knees touched. not lightly, resting, connected like they belonged that way. For a few long seconds, we didn't speak. We just breathed the same space. Then John turned toward me, his voice low, deliberate. "Stefan, earlier, at the stream." He paused, searching for the right words. I meant every part of that. I swallowed, my chest tightening. "I did too." He nodded slowly, as if he already knew, but needed to hear it. His hand rested beside mine on the bench, fingers brushing, barely. Then, intentionally, I turned my palm upward. He didn't hesitate. Our hands slid together naturally, fingers curling with a slow certainty that made my whole body warm. His thumb traced a small, gentle line across the back of my hand. A simple touch, but it carried something deep, something I'd been craving without even realizing it. He exhaled softly. Then he leaned closer. "Stefan." My name left his lips like a confession. I looked up, meeting his eyes, the steady warmth, the vulnerability he didn't try to hide anymore. He cupped my jaw lightly, his touch warm and sure, and then he kissed me. Not tentative like before, not cautious. This kiss was deeper, confident, full of something blooming between us, something neither of us were pretending not to feel anymore. His lips moved with intention, with gentleness but also with certainty, like he was telling me everything he couldn't put into words. I lifted a hand to his chest, feeling his breath catch beneath my palm. When we finally parted, our foreheads stayed pressed together, breaths mingling, hearts beating too fast and too close. He whispered, "I haven't wanted something like this in a long time." My answer came out before I even thought it through. I didn't think I'd ever find someone who made me feel this way. The truth hung in the warm air between us. Simple, fragile, real. John stood, still holding my hand. He tugged gently, guiding me toward the bed we'd shared the night before. "Come here," he said softly. Not a command, an invitation. We lay on our sides facing one another at first, sharing small smiles, sharing breath. Then he pulled me closer, slowly, giving me time to refuse, though we both knew I wouldn't. My head rested beneath his chin. His arms wrapped around me with a protective ease that made every locked-up part of me loosen. There was no rush, no urgency, just presence, just closeness, just warmth. His thumb pressed slow circles on my back. My fingers curled lightly around his shirt. Our legs brushed, then settled naturally together. I felt safe, truly, deeply safe. The kind of safety that only comes when someone's presence feels like home. We lay there talking quietly about nothing, about everything. About the storm, about his life in the forest, about my plants and my work and the loneliness neither of us had wanted to admit to. Every word made the space between us smaller. Every breath made the connection deeper. At some point our voices drifted into quiet, but our hearts kept talking. Wrapped in his arms, warmth pressed into every place that cold rain had touched the night before, I felt something I had never felt so clearly. I had found what I was missing. Not peace, not escape, partner, him. And as the lantern dimmed and night settled around us, I knew this was the night neither of us wanted to end. If someone asked me why I went camping that weekend, I'd probably give the simple answer first. I needed a break. I needed quiet. I needed to breathe. But the truth, the deeper truth, is something I didn't understand until much later. I went into the forest because I was lonely. I went because the silence was easier than the ache of wanting someone I didn't believe existed for me. I went because being alone in nature felt less painful than being alone in a life I had built for myself. I thought I knew what I was running from. I had no idea what I was running toward. When that storm ripped through my tent, when the sky felt like it was falling, when I was convinced the night would swallow me whole, I didn't know fate was already on its way. And fate had a name. John. The ranger who stepped through lightning to reach me. The man who shielded me from the storm like my safety mattered more than his own. The stranger whose arms around me felt more like home than any place I'd ever lived. After that night, after the warmth of him, the way he looked at me, the way our breaths fell into the same rhythm as if they'd been waiting to sync, I couldn't pretend my life was the same. John didn't disappear after the storm. He didn't treat what happened like a moment that existed only because the night was frightening and the world was fragile. He stayed. Not always in the same cabin, not every single day. Our lives were still separate in routine. But he showed up. Over and over again. We met on weekends when I returned to the forest. We talked about everything: work, family, fears we had buried for years, hopes we didn't admit out loud. We hiked the same hidden trail. We drank the same morning coffee in front of the same fire. And every time our hands found each other's, it felt like rediscovering something we'd lost, not something we were learning for the first time. He became the person who checked in on me just to ask how my day was. The person who listened when I didn't know how to explain what I was feeling. The person who held me like I was someone worth holding. Somewhere between the storm and the sunlight, between danger and comfort, between fear and quiet mornings, he became my partner. And looking back now, telling you this story, one question echoes louder than everything else. Was I ever really camping alone? Maybe I wasn't. Maybe the universe had already decided where I needed to be. Maybe the storm wasn't a disaster, it was a direction. A push toward the one person who understood me without trying. The one man who saw the pieces of me I kept hidden and didn't look away. The one I didn't know I was waiting for. So tell me, do you believe some storms don't destroy your life? They guide you to the person who will fix it?